believe it is already the 20th day of October of the year 1824. But nonetheless, a day of celebration, is it not?
Yes! Woo!
How I love you Americans. For the reality is you have no idea of what I am celebrating, yet most of you are willing to celebrate right along with me.
Yes!
You know, I think that is a credit to the American people, how very optimistic you are. Or simply in want of a party. Well, how could you know, my dear friends? For I, General Lafayette, have only recently returned back to America after 40 long years. Indeed, my friends, the last time I set foot upon American soil was just after the signing of the Treaty of Paris, which of course occurred in September of 1783, ending the Great War for American independence. So I returned for 5 months in 1784 to celebrate with all of you, my beloved brothers and sisters here in America. But dear friends, on this occasion, even though 40 years have passed, let us never forget how that independence was in fact achieved. For all of those brave soldiers, sailors, and Marines alike, who fought and bled upon countless battlefields to achieve American freedom, let us applaud them all!
Woo!
Well, my dear friends, I have returned courtesy of your very own President of these United States, Monsieur James Monroe, to be what he calls a guest of the nation, to tour all 24 United States and territories. 24, monsieur, can you imagine? At this rate, you'll have as many as 50 one day. Could you imagine that? Well, indeed, he has invited me back to tour this great nation, this nation that still exists because of all of you, the American people. Well, I made my way to New York in front of a crowd of 40,000, made my way southwards to Philadelphia City, where I went to that place where you declared for independence, and I referred to it as Independence Hall. I do hope that that shall stick. Then I made my way further southwards to Baltimore. Of course, I went to the Maison Blanche, to the White House, to meet with the President. And last evening, of course, being the 19th of October, is the day we remember our greatest victory in the war, 12 miles to the north at a place called Yorktown. So there was a wonderful, oh indeed, my friend, there was a wonderful celebration last evening, wasn't there? In fact, I saw all of you there last evening. I danced once or twice with you, didn't I? Oh, of course I did. Oh, it was truly magnificent. In fact, they were able to acquire the tent that His Excellency General Washington used during the course of the siege. They used it to outline the dance floor, and we danced, of course, many of those popular dances of the third quarter of the 18th century, the minuets, the cotillon, the Scottish reels, and all of the country dances. Oh, we danced the night away. But there was an interesting note. Right next to the dance floor, there was a cannon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would you, General Lafayette, concern yourself with a single cannon when your whole life has been spent upon a battlefield? Well, this particular cannon had a very close place to my heart. For you see, it was during the great siege of Yorktown, as we were constructing our entrenchments there, opposing the English at Yorktown, when all of a sudden I noticed in the distance, in the English lines, a white puff of smoke denoting that they were firing in my direction. Well, I looked to my left, I looked to my right, and there was no place to hide, except for a single cannon placed before me. So I dove underneath the carriage of this cannon, and the cannonball bounced off the barrel, saving my life. Oh, I embraced that cannon as if it was a long-lost friend. Believe it or not, my dear friends, that same cannon was present last evening. And I did just the same. I embraced that cannon as if it was a long-lost friend. Oh, my dear friend. Well, I'm looking forward to traveling even further south. I shall make my way to Norfolk, and then up the James River to Richmond Town. I shall, of course, go to Charlottesville and visit my dear friend and former president, Monsieur Jefferson, at his home. Then I shall make my way to Montpelier, or Montpelier, as he likes to call it, where my dear friend James Madison is to be found. Then I shall return back to the Maison Blanche for Christmas and the New Year. And then I shall begin my journey further south and to the west. I shall make my way to Georgia, of which I have never been, but looking forward to that. I shall cross over to the region known as Louisiana and to the city of Nouvelle-Orléans. I shall travel up the Mississippi River into the Kentucky region, crossing over the Ohio Valley into the upper part of the state of New York. and then I shall make my way back to the Maison Blanche, where I am told that next year you shall have yet another election, and perhaps it shall be the son of John Quincy Adams, that you elect as your new president. But it is up to you. The people must speak. But my friends, now that I have returned back to America, I am certainly reminded of what first inspired me to cross the great ocean and take part in this noble crusade. For friends, I can recall first hearing of this great cause back in 1775. You know, I was but a sous-lieutenant, a second lieutenant, newly promoted to the rank of captain. In truth, only because my father-in-law owned the regiment. A bit of a wedding gift. Well, there I had found myself billeted in the eastern part of France, in a city called Metz. And as was commonplace back then, we would often have these grandiose dinner parties with all of the most noble officers and attendants. And there we would typically speak about the various subjects of the day. Perhaps a war that had begun, a war that had concluded, a new treaty that had been signed, perhaps a new innovation in strategy or in tactics. But on one occasion we had a very special guest, and this guest was none other than the Duke of Gloucester. Yes, the same name applied to that route principale right here in Williamsburg. And, well, who is the Duke of Gloucester? Well, he happens to be the brother to George III, the King of England. And we soon discovered that this man was rather sympathetic to the American cause. In fact, many were of the opinion that he thought America should be free and independent. So we all listened in on what he had to say. Of those present there that evening, there was the famous Duc de Broglie. Many of you might remember him from his exploits during the 7 Years' War. And there were some who said that he was going to be given command of the Continental Army in the place of General Washington. Now, the Duc de Broglie was a fine officer, to be sure, but I think we are all thankful that General Washington remained in command, are we not?
Yes.
Of course we are. Now, there was my beloved friend, le Baron de Kolb, the one man perhaps most responsible for bringing me here to America. I can still recall receiving the dispatch of the news of his death after the Battle of Camden in August of 1780. Most distressful to me, but even more so to the great cause of American freedom, for he was such a fine officer. There was, of course, the Chevalier de Buisson. Madame, the Chevalier de Buisson, I thought I recognized you. Oh, my dear friends, this is truly a rare coincidence. Believe it or not, Madame, you danced a minuet with the Chevalier, didn't you? Oh, come now, you are being quite modest, Madame. You realize you are still the talk at Versailles. Oh, dear friends, she danced the most magnificent minuet I think I have ever seen dance before. Do you recall the name, Madame? Le Dauphin? Exactly, Madame. Oh, you must have worked with your dance master for weeks, if not months. Oh, perfectly stepped, not one error. And upon conclusion of this perfect minuet, what did the Queen say to you? Oh, c'est magnifique. It is magnificent. And you know very well she never gave compliments to anyone. Oh, but herself. Oh, Madame, if only I could find a few musicians, we could all see an example of that minuet. Would you like that, my friend? Oh, we'll never find any musicians awake before 6 p.m. Oh, another time, Madame, but rest assured, you are still the talk at Versailles. Oh, forgive me, I have veered off the course of my story. Let me return. So, that evening, we spoke of many subjects, to include the fighting at Lexington and at Concord, the Grand Congress in Philadelphia, and of course, the great man himself, that of General Washington. So it was by the conclusion of this meeting that I told my brother officers that I was ready and willing to fight and, if need be, die for this cause. Now I know what you're all thinking. Why, Monsieur le Marquis? Why would you want to go and fight and perhaps die in another man's war? For France and England were not at war at that moment. Why would you want to risk yourself in such an endeavor? Well, I think you know the answer to that question. For this had been a war like none other in the history of man. Had it not? It was a war of great ideas, of the freedom, even the liberation of mankind. A war that had embraced the ideas of the great thinkers of what we call this enlightened age. This age of reason. with men like Voltaire and Rousseau and Montesquieu. These were people who believed that a man, no matter what station in life he might be born, whether he be black or white, Catholic or Protestant, rich or poor, slave or free, should not make a difference, but simply by the way in which that person would carry themselves and prove themselves in this world. My dear friends, after these more than 40 long years, are you still in agreement with these great ideas?
Yes.
Well, I am pleased to hear it, for